Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of chapter 16 of Judges as we read about the climactic and dramatic end of the story of Shimshon, of Samson. We pick up where we left off, really at the bottom of Shimshon's life, at the end where it seems like he's accomplished his objective which was to get away from that mission, that special mission which he was set out for. The tragedy of a person who had the potential to be a spiritual leader and guide and judge for the people of Israel, but instead he chose to cavort with Philistine prostitutes and fall in love with various Philistine women who were treacherous and took advantage of him. And he'd rather go there in order to get away from his mission than anywhere else. In the end, Delilah gave him up to the Philistines, shaved off his hair, had him give over his entire heart and profess and say that this is my source of strength, is that I am a Nazir Elohim, that I am a special Nazir, a special relationship to God, but I don't want that anymore. Once he gave that away, God took his special strength away, and he's captured, and he is now a slave among the Philistines. However, with verse 22, chapter 16 is where I left off. So, Vayachel sa'aro sholit sameach. When he's here at the bottom, the hair of his head started to grow again. Ka'asher gulach. The hair that had been shaved off is starting to grow again. The symbolism here is that when he is down in the dumps, when he's in the place, now he realizes where everything led, and he realizes, that feeling, that relationship to God in his heart is starting to come back. It's starting to grow. The hair is the symbol that symbolizes that special relationship. Visarne Plishtim, however, the overlords, the Philistine noblemen, Esfu Lizbach Zevach Gadol, they all gathered together to bring a great big sacrifice, Lidagon Elohim, to Dagon, who is the name of the Philistine idol. The Philistine god was Dagon, Simcha, and to have a big party, Vayomru. And they called out and said, Natan Eloheinu biadenu, our God Dagon gave in our hands a Shimshon Oivenu, Samson, our enemy, the enemy who has been harassing us so much, who has caused so much problems for our Philistine dominance in the land. Our God has given him to us. We now have him. Let's make a big party. Vayiru oso ha'am. And the people saw Shimshon as a slave, Vayahalu et Elohim, and they gave praise to their God, Ki Amru, that they said, Nasan Eloheinu biadenu, our God has given us in our hand, et Oivenu, our enemy, Veit Machriv Artzenu, the one who destroys our land. If you remember the story where he burnt down their land. Vasher Hirba et Chalalenu, the one who caused so many of us to die. Vayehi Ketov Libam, and it was when their hearts were merry, meaning presumably with wine. Vayomru, and they all said, Kiru l'Shimshon v'sachek lanu, call Samson out and let him play for us, let him entertain us. The ultimate abuse. Vayikru l'Shimshon, and they called to Shimshon mibeis ha'asurim, from the jail. Vayitzachek lifneim, and he danced in front of them. Vayamidu oso beinu hamudim, and they stood him up, or presumably tied him up between the pillars. So they're all watching him entertain them out as he is tied up. This is where Shimshon landed. This is the depths of where he landed, because he wanted to forsake his people. Vayomer Shimshon el Hanar, and Shimshon said to the boy, the young man, Hamachazik biado, who was holding his hand. Remember, Shimshon's eyes had been gouged out by his captors. So there was a boy who was holding his hand, leading him along. So Hanicha osi v'hamisheni atamudim. Leave me, let go of my hand, and let me show me where these pillars are. Asher habayit nachon aleim, these strong pillars upon which the house, this building in which this party is occurring, is being supported by these things, v'eshoin aleim, so that I can lean upon them. Basically, he's telling I need those particular pillars that support the structure because they're strong, and I want to lean upon them. V'habayit, and the home was maleha anashim, v'anashim was full of men and women. V'shama, and within that building where the party was, kol sarnei plishtim, all of the Philistine nobility. V'al hagag, and on the roof of this building, kishloshet alafim ish v'isha, was approximately 3,000 men and women, haroim b'schok Shimshon, all of whom had been watching and been entertained by the dancing that Shimshon was performing for them. Presumably this was like their temple, the place where they have their parties for celebrating their God. Vayikra Shimshon el Adonai, and Shimshon called out to God, Vayomar, and he said, Adonai Elohim, the Lord God, Zochreini na, remember me. It seems like, God, you've completely forsaken me. And Shimshon realizes, I understand. Of course, I know why. I did forsake you. I know what happened. I know what I did. Now, I finally learned my lesson at this end of my life, and I realize that I do have a mission. I do have a purpose. Zochreini na, please remember me. V'chazkeini na, please give me strength. Acha pam hazeh ha'olam, please at least this one time, God. V'inakma, and let me finally take revenge. Nekam achas, just one time, one revenge mishtei einai miplishtim, for just one of my eyes against the Philistines. Here he finally turns to God and remembers that where his strength really comes from. Vayilpot Shimshon et shnei amudei hatavach, and Shimshon was able to grasp onto the two posts that supported the entire building, asher habayit nachon aleim, that supported the building, vayisamech aleim, and he leaned upon them. Echad b'yamino, one of the posts in his right hand, v'echad b'shmolo, and one in his left hand. Vayomer Shimshon, and Shimshon said, Tamos nafshi im plishtim, let me die together with the Philistines. Vayet b'koach, and he pulled with strength. Vayipol habayit al hasronim, and the entire house toppled down upon all of the nobility, v'al kol ha'am, and the entire people asher bo, that were within the home. Vayu hamesim asher himis b'moso, and the dead that he killed when he performed this act of killing, Rabim asher himis b'chayav, were even more people in this event that he had killed during his entire life, and all the exploits that we read about in the past chapters. Vayerdu achav v'chol beis avihu vayesuoso, and his brothers and his father's house came. Finally, he rejoined his family rather than forsake his family. His whole life, he had tried to leave his family behind, do his own thing, go his own way, and abandon his purpose and his mission. But now, and after his death, his family comes. Vayalu vayikbruoso, and they came and they buried him. Bein sorah uvein eshtaol. The poetic power of these words, again, it all started with just an anonymous woman who was never named, just random woman in the land of Israel among the people, of no particular noteworthiness, except that she lived somewhere between Sarah and Eshtaol. And her son, who had now had a major victory against the Philistines, presumably helped in at least decreasing the oppression that his people were suffering, just simply buried somewhere in the same place where his origin was, somewhere between Sarah and Eshtaol. Bekever Manoach Aviv, in the same gravesite where his father Manoach was buried. V'hu Shafat es Yisrael esim shana, and the entire time of his judging of Israel was 20 years. And remember, interestingly enough, the 20 years, this is before the story of Delilah. Remember when I said in the beginning of chapter 16, in the last podcast, I mentioned that when Shimshon went to Gaza and slept with the prostitute, he had left. He had already done his judgment. In other words, that period of time when he performed as a leader was 20 years, and then he left. He was gone. That's the story of the prostitute, his relationship with Delilah. All that happened, he was gone from his judge. He left his mission. He left his mission of leadership, spent all of his time doing everything he could to avoid it. But in the end, destiny caught up with him, and he ended up performing this act which relieved the oppression of his people, despite his best efforts to avoid achieving his mission. Thank you so much for studying the story of Samson together. We still have a few more stories in the book of Judges to read. Looking forward to getting together and studying chapter 17 and the rest of this very not so inspiring book of Judges. It's a book which tells us just how low people can get and how to the depth to which the people without proper leadership were able to sink. Have a wonderful day.